politics on the planet Earth. What is the IMF?
The IMF stands for International Monetary Fund. It's an international governmental organization. It's part of the New World Order. Then the New World Order isn't that new. They formed in 1945. I guess George Soros is that old.
I remember when it was the New World Order.
Yes, the IMF was formed in 1945 as part of the Bretton Woods Conference in New Hampshire. Boy, these socialists sure need a lavish resort to discuss third world poverty. Maybe they keep them poor so they can stay at the hotel longer. Hey, any of you broke nigger want a loan? I told you you can't say the N-word. Don't you remember when you wanted to do Dr. Dre karaoke? I said Nicaraguans. They got an IMF loan in 1978. Why you gotta censor me?
Why was the IMF created?
It was established to maintain the exchange rates. In 1945, every currency was pegged to the dollar. Then the dollar was pegged to gold. Under the gold standard, things were so good that everybody got laid. That's where they get the expression, chicks are gold diggers. They're not looking for fiat money. Well, now we realize that the gold standard doesn't work, so we had to change it. It lacks liquidity. It didn't work because of the cost of the Vietnam War. Vietnam was very expensive, but it was also unpopular, so they couldn't tax Americans to kill Vietnamese people. So to pay for it, they printed money. Dude, the gold is melting. That's not the drugs, bro. They're actually melting the gold and selling it.
When did Earth go off the gold standard?
Nixon took us off the gold standard in 1971. Then finally, 2 years later, we left Vietnam. I'm surprised Nixon only has 2 kids, considering he has such trouble pulling out. This is preposterous. The IMF was formed in 1945. By 1971, the gold standard had years to succeed. What are you talking about? FDR banned gold in 1933. Oh, you can redeem your cash for gold, but if we catch you with gold, you go to jail. You might as well put us on the cocaine standard. George Bush would like that. It's private investment banks like Goldman Sachs that want to keep us on paper fiat currency so they can profit off IMF bailouts. It's ironic. Goldman Sachs hates sacks of gold.
I'm very confused. So what does the IMF do now?
Now that we're off the gold standard, the entire reason the IMF was created is gone. They didn't say, though, hey, let's give the power back. Now the IMF helps stabilize countries' currency crisis by lending money when they can't uphold their currency pegs. To control their currencies, the IMF forces other nations to reduce their spending. This is called austerity. This is hypocritical, though, because the IMF is controlled by America. America thinks you should reduce your deficit spending. God, get it under control.
I don't get it. What does a currency peg mean?
A currency peg means to have one currency move in value with another currency. Let's explain this with the Mexican peso. They had a currency crisis in 1994, known as the tequila crisis. That phrase is offensive and stereotypical. We shouldn't be using them as an example. Use a fictional currency, like Disney dollars. Have you ever seen the workers at Disneyland? Disney dollars are Mexican pesos. And by the way, it's ironic that the host of this show, the little girl, is Spanish. The alien is an illegal alien.
Can you morons please just explain how the currency peg works?
Well, they establish a trading band. This is the maximum and minimum values that the currency is allowed to travel. When the currency becomes too strong, the Mexican central bank intervenes in the market to buy up dollars, thus bringing the currency back down. Meaning they print pesos and buy dollars. We don't use those words. The Mexican central bank provided liquidity. The government wants to print money, but they don't want to say that. They instead say, provide liquidity. So this way people go, that sounds good. Well, the word liquidity means how fast an asset can be turned into cash. It's a measurement of time. It's not a substitute for being broke. If you print money, you still have the illiquid asset. And it's particularly an ironic word choice for Mexico. You're saying they lack liquids? The crisis is named after tequila. When the opposite happens and the peso gets too low in value, the Mexican central bank borrows US dollars and buys up pesos to bring the value back up. But when they can't borrow, the IMF distributes taxpayer money. It's now just poorly administered socialism. The IMF is like worldwide Obamacare. You're an ass clown. How can conservatives say the IMF is socialism when they loan money to other countries, not give? The IMF lends when the free market will not. We provide stability. By stability, you mean keep people poor. Oh, well, he always had nothing. It's stable. Not only does the IMF force these countries in debt, but to pay off the debt, they have to cut their social programs and privatize everything in the country to raise money. They have to privatize natural resources, privatize their public transportation systems, privatize their public water systems. Really? Private water? What's next? Private air? Republicans would be like, he's breathing free air. It's socialism. It's socialism because the IMF is propping up failed state-run enterprises like in Greece. It's mostly Europeans that run the IMF, and they want everyone on the same currency, just like the euro. This is why the EU is falling apart. No, they want it out because of immigration. Why can't conservatives respect diversity? You're being a hypocrite. Republicans should respect my ethnic and cultural differences. So let every country have their own currency. Everyone must be the same. I should just say my tax bracket is a race, so you'll respect my inequality. But if Wall Street hadn't done this predatory lending to begin with, we wouldn't have these currency crises. Go into the heart of Africa, what's that? You have AIDS? How'd you like a brand new Lamborghini? Listen, you're gonna die fast. Get there fast with no down payments. First, Wall Street wouldn't be taking these huge risks if it wasn't for bailouts. Second, it's the Federal Reserve's fault for setting interest rates so low that Wall Street has to take huge risks to get yield. We used to invest in US Treasuries. Now, to meet our pension fund liabilities, we invest in Thailand cockfighting.
Thailand, the cockfighting is a safe. US government bond, not safe. Too much debt.
Can you explain how a currency crisis works?
In 1997, Thailand had a crisis that the IMF had to bail out. So let's use them as an example. Around the time, interest rates in America were 3%, while interest rates in Thailand were 13%. So investors would borrow US dollars and invest them in Thailand, earning the difference between these two interest rates. This has a bubble-like mentality. As more people invest in Thailand, the currency goes up and the trade becomes more profitable. The time to invest in Thailand is now. As your stockbroker, I can tell you there'll never be a situation this good again. Pero ya, perdí, todo mi dinero en la crisis de tequila. Well, you can always borrow. Now, at some point, Wall Street realizes that Thailand can't pay their debts. But in this case, it's the private Thai bankers that got over indebted. How could Wall Street trust the balance sheets of banks in Thailand when even the country's purses are fake knockoffs? This all works perfectly until the exchange rate starts to move for a stronger US dollar and a weaker Thai baht. When that happens, everyone gets out of the trade at the exact same time. So Wall Street discriminates against hiring women, but their monthly cycles still align every time. So Thailand's currency rapidly shoots down in value, and right before there's a crash, the IMF comes in with a bailout. We can count on them to pay us back, right? The purpose of the bailouts is to contain the crisis from spreading. Some job that did. The crisis spread from Thailand to Indonesia to Korea to Malaysia to the Philippines. Investors wanted to dump all Asian assets. Honey, we have leftover Chinese in the fridge. What? Get rid of it! Sell! Sell! We were caught off surprise because this is a unique situation. You're an ass clown. These same problems existed in every other currency crisis. The IMF so poorly stabilizes the situation, it looks like an ICU heart attack monitor. Here's Mexico's currency, Thailand's currency, South Korea's currency, Brazil, Argentina, Russia. They never flatline, but your patience still dies. Here's the real reason that Wall Street lends to third world countries. See, if the government just handed US taxpayer dollars to Wall Street, we'd all go apeshit in protest. So instead, investment banks cleverly lend money to the third world. This way, the IMF pays the third world and the third world pays Goldman Sachs. This way, Goldman can go, I don't want a bailout. Don't you care about starving Asian babies? I'd love to see what social services the IMF can come up with next. Welcome to the IMF soup kitchen. I'm starving. Thanks for the soup. I'm starving.
Unfortunately, we're out of time. Can you please summarize?
To summarize, the IMF is an international governmental organization originally created to establish fixed exchange rates pegged to gold. Then to pay for the Vietnam War, Nixon ended the gold standard. This is ironic, because the IMF was created to ensure peace. So the IMF's original purpose is completely gone, but they didn't disband. Instead, power-hungry politicians used the IMF to spread a corrupt version of world socialism. Conservatives don't realize that this isn't real socialism, because smaller countries don't get an equal vote. Liberals don't realize that this isn't real capitalism because a government entity is loaning money. Then each one of these third world countries has to pay back the IMF loan even though it's Wall Street banks that got the money. Maybe that's why it's called the tequila crisis. You wake up the next morning and go, oh, why did I put all these people on my tab?